Okay, so we're going to get going. Like I said, we are the only ones here, so it's just Bruce and I. And let's, Bruce, I'll just open up. Like, what question? Do you have any questions that you'd like to do before maybe we dive into the actual like PowerPoint slides or anything?
No, I don't think so. Like I said, I've just gotten as far as the vocab, so I really haven't tackled anything yet. So whatever you want to start with is good.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let me pull up the PowerPoint slides. We are on chapter 22.
Getting down to the end.
We are we basically only have 4 chapters left because we only go through chapter 26. So yeah, it's not, we are not too far. Can you see, let me do a screen share. Oops, wrong one. Let's do this. Let's go there. Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Okay, let me zoom this up.
Okay.
So close that, and so we can maximize some of the space. Okay. Woo. Okay. So we're picking up the subjunctive mood, and then we're going to deal with some adverbs and some negative emphasis this chapter. So this should be kind of fun. Fun, obviously, put that in quotation. So for the subjunctive mood, the subjunctive is a mood of future possibility, volition, and deliberation. It's going to be used to express purpose, intention, potentiality, or possibility. So this is over against like the indicative, which says like you're stating fact, or at least fact as the speaker believes.
Right.
The difference here is that it's not this you're very intentionally expressing not fact, but either like purpose, intention, potentiality, possibility, desire, the possibility of 2 different options. And so all of these occur basically when maybe the future, oftentimes we're talking about the future and it being uncertain.
Okay.
Or even the past for that matter. So, and we'll talk about some of that. So when you negate it, you're going to negate it with the may form. So instead of oo, which was our indicative negation, may is going to be the negation for basically any non-indicative mood.
Okay.
So one big flag when you see a may in your sentence is that if you see a may as your negation, you need to understand that you're probably dealing with a non-indicative mood.
Okay.
And then the cognate forms of may, so like may dis and may de, are used to negate subjunctive verbs as well. Ume is going to be used together in a unit as an emphatic negation, and that's a very specific type of negation. And that's a negation. Instead of saying like not, it's like saying never ever. So you can't really overemphasize an ume negation in your translation. So like I've translated at times before, never ever ever.
Okay.
So like it's trying to make clear this idea that this whatever this is cannot and will not ever occur.
Okay.
So for the time and verbal aspect, the subjunctive mood is going to carry no inherent time significance. So that is so you're only going to have 2 tenses, which are the subjunctive and the subjunctive, which are the aorist and the present. So the good news is you don't have a bunch of tenses. You only have the aorist and the present. The aorist subjunctive has a perfective aspect to it. So it's not about time. It's about aspect.
Okay.
So the aorist subjunctive is going to be internal. So it's going to be an action in progress, as opposed to the present subjunctive, which is going to be imperfective. And it's going to have like an external or completed kind of perspective. And we'll talk more about what that looks like and how that ends up getting translated.
Isn't that kind of backwards from the indicative?
What I would say is that kind of. I mean, the aorist is always the internal view.
Oh, okay.
Remember, so the present could be either ongoing or perfective.
Right.
That's the I am running or I run.
Right.
So in here, the aorist is going to take the narrower perfective only. Yeah, the perfective only.
Okay.
And the hold on just a minute. You are right. These are flip-flopped.
Okay, that makes sense.
Sorry about that. I just dawned, like, looking at it, I just realized that that is not communicating what I wanted to. Okay. So the aorist is going to have the perfective aspect, which is going to be the external or completed. Something has fully happened,
Right.
as opposed to the present, which it is kind of in progress, imperfective. Does that make more sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's making.
So occasionally the future indicative is going to be found where you might expect the subjunctive. So you might expect a subjunctive, but instead there will be a future indicative there.
Okay.
Okay. And it's going to designate a more concrete action. So, and we'll get to talking about that. What?
Where it says where you would expect the subjunctive, does that mean that you might still see a may there either way?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. And so, and we're going to talk a little bit about that because there are these kind of certain kind of constructs that the subjunctives are normally going to appear in.
Right.
Like, like a certain formulation, and sometimes that future indicative is going to slip in there.
Okay.
When you wouldn't have necessarily anticipated it. So for the translation, it's always going to be context specific. So this goes back to that participle that was frustrating. The subjunctive is going to play in that kind of same space where all of it is contextual, and you're going to have to discern from the context what the kind of the best translation is. Some people opt for a generic may or might.
Okay.
It's not always necessarily the best translation. Long suggests that you don't do this at all. I would say that may or might is a good starting point, but I almost never end there.
Okay.
So I do may or might, and then I begin to kind of tease out what the other possibilities are. But just so, like, if I'm writing a gloss and I'm just trying to get the idea of the whole sentence, I might write may or might just to remind myself that I'm dealing with a subjunctive.
Okay.
In a quick English gloss, and then I'll often go back through and actually do a more like a fuller refinement.
Right.
So for the subjunctive formation, basically the big deal here is you're going to have no augment. So there is no augmentation that's going to happen with the subjunctive. So you remember how you would have like that element that drops in between your like your tense indicator?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start again. There's not going to be any historical augment on the front.
Okay.
So when on augment here, we're talking about a historical augment. It's going to be It's going to be formed using primary endings. So type 1 and type 3. But you're going to notice that the coupling vowel has been lengthened. So that coupling vowel that was normally there is going to be longer. Okay? So kind of like contracts. You remember with contracts, we'd have that lengthened coupling. The same type of thing is going to happen here. Notice that the active, the first active singular looks like the present active indicative. There's no change there. The third active singular, active singular, the at A looks like the second middle passage singular.
Right.
So you're going to need to pay attention to that. That's kind of a big deal. And context is going to be needed for parsing. So what you're going to do is you're going to actually look at your explicit subject and see what your explicit subject tells you.
All right.
Okay, let's move on. Oops. So subjunctive formation, we're still doing this. There's two tenses possible, the present or the aorist, what we've kind of talked about. So it's going to use the same endings, only the aorist is going to have a tense indicator that's going to drop in a sigma or a theta, depending on it whether it's an active middle or a passive. Okay, so again, the aorist is taking a sigma tense indicator or a theta. The theta is for that passive, which is what we got used to, is that when you had an aorist with a passive, it takes that theta tense indicator. The same type of thing is going to happen here. It's going to use the same endings. So if you'll notice, the differences between the endings are literally is that sigma there.
Yes.
That's the only thing, because you have no historical augment like what we talked about. So it's literally has that sigma or that theta dropped in.
All right.
So second arists are going to have no tense indicator, that sigma and theta, but they're going to have that stem change that we've come to expect.
Okay.
And so it's going to look like, ending-wise, it's going to look like the type 1 endings, the arist type 1 endings with the lengthened vowel changes, but it's going to have the arist stems, or the second arist stems changes.
Gotcha.
Here in Ericoma. So EME for the subjunctive is going to be, it's basically just the endings lengthened. O, ace, a with a circumflex. So notice that these are the same form. These forms are the same as the active subjunctive endings, but they're going to have a smooth breathing marks and a circumflex. So notice these are smooth, not rough, and they all have circumflexes. So all those should be. Go ahead.
How do you translate those?
Well, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
I may be. I might be hungry. I may be.
Okay.
It says possibilities. So the EME has no aorist subjunctive form. So it's always going to be having this progressive sense, which are those which is the present, the quote unquote present.
Okay.
So dependent uses of the subjunctive. So dependent subjunctive clauses will begin with a subordinating conjunction. And so sometimes you're going to have these clauses that are dependent clauses in a sentence that are going to be used as subjunctive. And they're going to be there. They're going to have the uses are going to be for positive purpose. So this goes back to like one of the functions of the subjunctive is this purpose statement. I am doing this in order that such and such may occur.
Okay.
Purpose involves the intentionality of action of the agent towards the intended goal. Sometimes purpose isn't as obvious, and result is going to be more appropriate. I am doing this so that X may occur. If you look at this, John 1, 5:3, I write these things to you in order that, or so that, you may know, it's you know, but it's subjunctive, so you may know that you have, there's your verb,
okay,
life eternal. These technically are modifying each other. They've been split by the verb, which is very unusual.
Okay.
You have life eternal. Make sense?
Yes.
So you'll notice that basically you have a normal sentence.
Right.
And then you have this content clause, this hina. So the conjunctions, subordinating conjunctions that you're looking for are things like hina, or ina, sorry, aeon, opos, me pote, stuff like that. And those can signal one of these. So if you find a subjunctive inside of one of these these subordinating conjunctions, you shouldn't be surprised. And what's happening is probably purpose is being communicated here.
I got you.
Okay, so sometimes negative purpose is going to show up, and clauses are typically formed with a hina may in order that not, or sometimes a me pote, which is going to be something like lest ever, like so that it may not occur, or something like that. Content clauses or indirect discourses may be expressed positively or negatively. Such content is either indirect discourse or verbal complement, and both these could be subjunctive as well. So these are some other dependent subjunctive uses where it has, like sometimes the content clause will have a subjunctive in it, or sometimes the discourse itself will have a subjunctive. If it's positive, it's going to use the hina clause. If it's negative, it's going to use may. So for 1 Corinthians 4:2, it's going to be something like, it is sought in among the stewards. Interesting. That's that tis some be found faithful. I'm pulling from long here. Sought among the housekeepers, the stewards. And I think what he's suggesting here is that it's probably the purpose. This is maybe another purpose.
Right.
The purpose of seeking this among the stewards is that some can be found faithful.
Okay.
And then down here, watch this command. You don't know commands yet, but watch. And what's the content or maybe this is probably the negative purpose. The reason why you need to watch is that so you would not be deceived. Passive. You can see that theta.
And you say that's the content clause part there?
That's probably a negative purpose.
Okay.
So he said normally it's going to be henna may. So maybe it would be negative. Maybe it would be negative content. So and it would be negative content and probably a verbal compliment. You watching something, you're bewaring of something. What are you bewaring? That you not be deceived. So yeah, so it's probably verbal compliment, a negative verbal compliment. That's probably the more accurate summation of what this is. So it has the may, so it's a negative. Content is either indirect discourse or verbal compliment. It's not indirect discourse, right. But it's probably a verbal compliment because it's demanding that you're actually seeing or being wearing of something, being aware of something or seeing something. And that is namely, what is it you're being wearing that you not be deceived.
So let me make sure I've got this clear in my head. When you see the may or the henna, is that going to kind of give you an idea as to whether it's going to be negative purpose or content clause?
So negative purpose is going to henna may.
Henna may, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and so because it didn't have henna, that's what moved me away from the negative purpose, was because there wasn't an actual henna clause. Henna is normally associated with purpose. So if we jump back a slide, you notice that all these positive purposes are normally going to use something like henna. Sometimes there's other stuff, but normally it's henna. And like this, we have basically negative purpose is henna may.
Okay. Gotcha.
But if you just have henna, you may be dealing with a content instead of a purpose, or an indirect course instead of a purpose. So it's not always purpose. If it's negative and it's just may, you're dealing with the negative either content clause or negative indirect discourse.
Okay, gotcha.
So sometimes other uses of the subjunctive, the epexegetical use, it's going to be used with nouns, adjectives, and demonstratives. So a henna clause may be used to specify the content of a noun or pronoun clause. So this is going to be similar to the content clauses above, but those content clauses pertain to verbs, where this is actually linking to a noun, adjective, or demonstrative. Okay? So this is going to be something like, and he or this one, this is love. Henna, what is love? That. And then this is telling you the content of what that love is.
Okay.
And it's that we walk according to the commandments of him, his commandments. The genitive is modifying that noun.
That parapetomen what is that a demonstrative, or it says nouns, adjectives, or demonstratives? Which one is that?
It's not. So this subjunctive, this is the subjunctive verb.
Right.
Omen. Okay. And it's pointing back. So back here, let me jump back real quick. When you have a content or an indirect discourse, it's filling the content of a verb. Okay. What is the content of watching? It's not being deceived. Okay.
Right. Okay.
When you have an apexegetical, the content is the content of a noun or an adjective or demonstrative, not a verb. So the content of agape, the noun, what is love?
Right.
Love is, and then he said, this is love. And it's refilling the meaning of what love is, namely that we walk according to his commandments. You see that? So you have a subjunctive being used with a hina, and it's being used apexegetically. So instead of being it the result or the purpose, and then, so if it was a result or purpose, you try to translate it something like this. And this is love, so that we walk according to his commands. And that's nonsensical because that isn't love. Does that make sense? It's not telling you what love is. Right. So this hina has to be interpreted using the apexegetical. So it's referring instead to what love is. It's renaming what love is, namely that we walk according to his commands.
Okay.
This is how we'd have like an apexegetical or even like a predicate nominative. Not a predicate nominative, I'm sorry. You'd have like an appositional nominative. We love this one, Jesus the Christ, or something. Like that's a restatement of this, who this one is. Yes. With this apexegetical, it is a restatement of another noun.
Gotcha.
And so you have this hina often abutted up against whatever that other noun is.
Will they normally come after that, or
they'll immediately normally come immediately after the thing that they are redefining?
Okay.
Which is why you see this hina butted up against agape. Because it's redefining for us what love is. And notice that it's in the subordinate clause. Again, remember, this is this whole clause is that we walk according to his commands. Does not make sense on its own, because that the hina, that links to some other complete thought.
Gotcha.
Okay. So the indeterminate and contingent conditional clauses, it's going to use like things like aon, os, osan, otan. The subjunctive is going to be used with some form of on. And you see that's baked in here to some of these. Remember, this is eon. This is a conjunction of e, if, on, os, on, otan, or etc. So there are other forms that are going to combine with on. It's going to indicate potential circumstance or contingency. So sometimes in English, we're going to translate something like you want to use ever in combination with this. So if ever, whoever, whenever, wherever, however. Those are kind of the possibilities. And so aon is if ever. You remember E is your if. So if ever, whoever, etc.
All right.
And so an example of this is going to be like for if, and here's your subjunctive. Because again, remember, we're defining when the subjunctive is used.
Okay. So
for if, and then we have this second person, you, if you love if you love, is this a perfective aspect? So it's going to have that aorist. You can see it right there. So if you love the ones loving you, you have a participle here. It looks like ontas. It's hiding here underneath that. Your modifier is hiding there. So if you love the ones, substantival participle, the one loving you, and then ask the question, what reward do you have? Do you have what as a reward or as your reward? And then you have a question mark here. Does that make sense?
I guess I'm gonna have to study it a little bit more.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I'm really I'm not really sure that I'm grasping it just like I need to.
Sure, and that's fine. So the good news is this: when you get into subjunctives, here's the deal. It's going to look like you're going to recognize it as a verb because the last letter or two are going to be the same letters that you'd always expect to find with verbs.
Right.
But what you're going to see is you're going to see it either with no connecting vowel, no tense indicator, or a sigma or a theta. It's going to look a little bit weird to you. And like if that sigma is there, you're going to go, well, that ending doesn't ever, type 1, type 3s never have a sigma unless they're a future. Remember that?
Right.
And so you're going to look at it and you're going, well, that's kind of weird. What's going on here? And you're going to translate it probably as a future if you have to see that sigma, or as a present. But you're going to notice that there's a lengthened vowel there. And you're going to be like, I have to do something with that because I know this isn't a contract verb, for example, or whatever.
Right.
And so oftentimes you're probably going to translate this right, even if you don't know that you're dealing with subjunctive or it doesn't occur to you right away. You would translate it more concrete. The error you would make if you didn't recognize you're dealing with subjunctive is you would try to translate it more concrete than it actually is.
Okay.
Oh, like, so for example, in this Matthew 5:46 example, if you just did this literally, for if, because that aeon is if, so you know that.
Right.
For if you love, that's that perfect, that perfective aspect. If you love the ones loving you with that participle. So without knowing that this is subjunctive, if you just translated it word for word as a normal, future, or if you translated future, you translated something like if you will love those loving you, as opposed to a subjunctive, which is just going to be if you love, because the if is what's creating that possibility, that uncertainty that it may or may not be true.
Right.
Okay. So these are the dependent uses. So with that, as you can see, hina shows up like all over the case preceding subjunctives. It's the hina, presence of a hina almost always signal that a subjunctive mood is going to follow. A subjunctive mood verb is going to follow. You see a hina, you're probably dealing with a subordinate subjunctive. You're probably dealing with a hina clause. Or the hina clause itself is probably going to be in the subjunctive.
Okay.
And as we've and this is just restating what we've kind of looked at in the prior slides, that hina can communicate purpose, result, negative purpose, a content or indirect discourse, epexegetical, so redefining a noun or adjective, etc., or it could be used as a demonstrative. That. So this is just kind of giving you how the different ways that the hina might function and ways that you might translate that. So, and that would be worthwhile knowing that kind of range of hina and how those map. You know, hina as purpose, which translates in order that, etc. So that would be a good, selection of information to memorize.
All right.
Sim suggests that hina's main function is to alert the reader to expect a thought, desire, or intention of the speaker. So this grammarian is actually suggesting that the presence of hina itself is to alert the reader that we're about to talk about thoughts or desires or intentions.
Okay.
So that's how closely hina is tied to the subjunctive. So those are dependent uses, hence those that are going to be used mostly hinas, those subordinating conjunctions. But for independent uses of subjunctive, what's going to happen is that verbs in the subjunctive mood may be used independently. Such clauses are not subordinate and no conjunctions needed to introduce them. Now, these types of uses, these independent uses, there are a handful of them, and we're going to go through them now. One is the hortatory subjunctive, and it's going to only occur with the first person plural subjunctive. So this only occurs with first person plurals. And it's going to be a polite injunction or command that the speaker is including themselves in. So you're going to translate it as let us, and then whatever the verbal idea is. Okay. Let us love one another. Let us do good. Let us feed the hungry. And so it's this kind of command that that the author is including themselves in the actual command action. So in this example, this cat is like an assensive, so it's going to be like also or even. And so we have let us go, I go. Here's your main verb is I go, where the omicron here is lengthened. And then you have the omen ending. So let us go. And then us, here's an explicit us. Or we. Let us or let we go. We doesn't sound right, which is why I'm using us. This is that first that is hold on just a minute. Huh. So actually Long is interpreting this this ames, interestingly enough, as part of this hina clause, which is really unusual, and I don't necessarily agree with that. But I'm going to go with his translation anyways. And then you have that hina subordinate clause. You see that?
Yes.
So we have another subjunctive here. I did not highlight this subjunctive in orange because I wanted to highlight the hortatory subjunctive here.
Right.
But this is actually a content, or this is a maybe a purpose.
Right. Gotcha.
Or for the purpose or the intent, so that, in order to that, or so that we ourselves, and that this is that reflexive, like this is how he's tying this into that verb, so that we ourselves, and then this is die, so would die with him or might die with him. This would or might is what is conveying the subjunctive tense here. Okay. Or subjunctive mood, I'm sorry. So, and then with him, obviously. Okay, so that's the hortatory subjunctive, and it's this let us also go that you're seeing right here.
Gotcha.
So another use is a prohibition with may. So aorist subjunctive with a negative particle may is going to be used as a negative command. There aren't, when we get to the imperatives, which are commands, what you're going to find out is that there's no actual negative imperative. If you want to give a negative command, it's going to use a subjunctive, an aorist subjunctive with that may. That's how you give negative commands. And these are called prohibitions. So here's one from Hebrews 3:8, which is going to be this command, to harden is the verb here. You harden, but it's a negative command because we have the may negation. So do not harden the hearts of you all, your hearts. So this is a subjunctive. You can see it with the te ending. Normally this would be at te, but it's been lengthened. So that a te. Mm-hmm. So do not harden your hearts. Another use is going to be the deliberative question. So if a question is being asked as to like, and maybe there are various options available in the question, so you're deliberating between two possibilities. Mm-hmm. May is going to be put in. It may show up, that deliberation may show up in the subjunctive mood. It's going to be called a deliberative question. So when we get down here to John 6:5, you can see the question mark down here.
Right.
And then pothen, which is going to be like from where. And then this is, you can see the subjunctive here. Omen, you have the sigma for the aorist. This is showing you that this is an aorist, first person plural. So the sigma, we by. And then the should is the deliberative. Should we do this or should we not do this? And so this can be translated something like, from where should we buy bread, hina, so that or in order that, and then the phagosin, which is going to be something like, you see that osin right here? Mm-hmm. There's your ending with a lengthened omega, so you have the subjunctive here. That these ones eat, or that in order that these ones may eat, or just eat. Right. And so you can see purpose here. in order to that. So again, we have two subjunctives here. We're only focusing on this one because that's the deliberative question.
Sure.
Okay. Another one is the emphatic negation, the independent use of subjunctive. This is that never ever, that never ever ever. And the emphatic negation, it's going to be used to make a very emphatic denial of the possibility of some event. So it's not just saying that this is not going to occur. It's saying that there's actual no possibility that this thing ever could occur. Often it's going to be something like God will never, ever let this happen.
Right.
It's going to use both the oo and the may with the subjunctive, and you're going to translate it as something will never, ever happen. So Matthew 24:35. So we see the heaven and the earth will pass away. You have a future here. You see that? Seta. It will pass away, but the words of me will never, ever pass away. This is Jesus teaching in Matthew 24. And then finally, the imperatival use of the subjunctive, which is going to be something like, it's going to be very rare. You're not going to normally see it. It's going to, again, be with one of those henna clauses. And it's going to, you're going to find a henna unconnected to the main clause in the context of an exhortation. And this is going to be, Long calls this the imperatival henna, and it's going to be there. It's probably going to be implied a present verb. And Long kind of unpacks this in 436. So I'll let you take a look at that. It's super rare. There's only a handful of examples in the New Testament. He just wants you to be aware that it's a possibility. And so I'd encourage you to check out 436 just to kind of read through his example of that instance. And he only cites like 4 occurrences in the New Testament. So it's a fairly rare construction, all things considered.
Okay. All right.
And then adverbs. So we're going to move on to those adverbs. We know that the adverbs generally modify verbs. Adverbs will modify verbs, adjectives, or other adverbs. In English, we recognize them normally by that ly ending. So instead of just slow, it would be something like slowly, quietly. So it's telling you how a verbal idea or a verbal action is being done. They can also work with conjunctions or function as conjunctions. Adverbs occasionally can as well. And Long details this on 442. In Greek, adverbs can similarly be formed from adjectives. So oftentimes they use the neuter accusative singular form. There sometimes some adverbs are going to be formed by adding an os ending to the stem of the adjective. When this occurs, this is telling you something about the manner in which the action is accomplished. So it's going to take an adjective like dikeos, for example, which is righteousness. It's going to take the stem, which is dike. It's going to drop that os and pick up it's going to drop the omicron sigma ending, and it's going to gain the omega sigma ending. You see that? And when that occurs, it's turning that righteous into an adverb, righteously. So other endings similarly convey different senses. So, and Long has included a bunch of these. I would get to know these different senses. If an os gets added to the ending, it's talking about the manner in which something's done. If it's a te is added, it's going to talk about the time in which something is done. E or an iota, it could be time or place where. U could be place where. Then could be place where from. De, direction to where. And is, denoting number. And Long deals with some of these here in the text. So on negative emphases, we've kind of talked about the negative emphases here with the may or oo and the kind of the nuances there. But Long just kind of details it more robust here at the end, where he talks about Greek has a variety of ways to negate things. So the more negatives, the more emphasis. So you don't have like double negatives, like a negative and negating a negative. The more negatives you see added on there, the more emphasis that the author is saying this is not happening.
Gotcha.
This is not happening. That type of thing. You almost will never see that many negations, but I'm trying to drive, it's hyperbole. I'm trying to drive home the point. So with oo and may, oo is going to be used for the indicative. We've talked about this. It's a direct, positive, categorical, indefinite. It's dealing with those concrete ideas that are negated. Where may is going to be used for non-indicative nudes, so things that are doubtful, indirect, indefinite, hypothetical, those things. This may not occur. This should not occur. We do not want this to occur. All those are, may occur using this may negation. Long as provided a bunch of other forms of negation. And if you'll notice on that chart, every time you have some type of oo construction, it can also show up as a may construction in Greek.
Ah, okay.
So anything that you've learned with an oo can show up as a may. And if that may shows up, you need to know that you're not in the indicative mood any longer. You're dealing with some other mood that you've moved into.
Okay.
Okay. And then that is everything. Okay, so questions. Just overwhelming? Is it practice time?
Probably, yes. I would say so.
Well, let's just do something easy. Let's jump to the exercises. And what we're going to do is we're just going to go through some of the parsing, because that should be one of the least kind of overwhelming aspects of that should be one of the least overwhelming aspects of this, just simply because we know all those endings, right? Like there should be not really anything that should be too unusual in these verbs. Oh, that's funny. Long did not provide any parsing charts for just subjunctive. Well, so much for that. I had a good idea. We'll just delete some of these and we'll dive into these. Okay. Let's jump on in. Let's just start with this John number 1 on 22D. And what we'll do is we are just going to go through and mark up the sentence as we normally do. And as we bump into subjunctives, we'll just deal with them. And we'll kind of feel out, and I'll help kind of supply some of the categories that we've just kind of went through as we wrestle with the senses of how to translate some of these. Let me see. Hold on just a minute. We're almost ready to get started. Okay. So, where do we start with the this first sentence on marking it up?
Punctuation.
Punctuation. And what do we have?
They have a period.
Excellent. Right there. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then you go to your conjunctions.
Do we have any conjunctions?
Not that I see.
Nope, we do not. How about verbs?
Yes. Theorese.
Theorese. Yeah, that's definitely a verb. But it looks kind of weird, doesn't it?
Right. And that ume kind of looks weird too. It looks kind of familiar.
That ume does look familiar. It should. And that is a, what kind of construction is that ume?
So the double negative or no?
Negative. You're right. But the technical term is the emphatic negation. And so that's emphatically negating. This is never ever happening. This idea is. Okay. Right. So, and how do we want to mark up? What do we for parsing this verb? Where do we want to draw some lines?
Let's see. It's got the. Let me see. I'm going to say it's is it future?
Well, remember, there's no future, but what you're seeing is you're seeing that sigma. You're dead on. You are seeing that sigma, and that is absolutely the observation you need to be making here. Okay. What two tenses do we have in the subjunctive?
Okay, you have the aorist and the
this is the aorist.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep, we have the aorist in the present because this has that tense indicator, that sigma. We know we're dealing with the aorist here.
Right. Okay. And that's
that eta is what?
The third person singular, right?
Yes. Yeah. Now, normally, if you just see that eta, what was the other possibility? Do you remember there was another possibility?
From this lesson?
Yes.
Well, not right off the top of my head, no. I'm sorry.
So remember, it was it's okay. Remember, it was the possibility was that third singular or the second plural, or not the second plural, the second singular in the type 3 endings. You remember that when middle passive that could show up as a middle passive. Okay. Why might we know that this is the third singular and not the middle passive? That type 3 ending.
Because it doesn't have the circumflex over it.
No. So if you'll notice, we have a sigma here. Yeah. Gotcha. For the aorist, if this is a middle passive, if it's a passive, middle passive, you're going to be using type 3 endings, right?
Right.
And the tense indicator, this sigma would have changed to a theta if it was a passive.
Okay, that's right.
So this is probably going to be something like, for this verb, it's going to be something like, he will never ever see.
Okay.
And what will he never ever see?
Death.
Yes.
Thanatos.
That's right. Yep, thanatos. It's an accusative sitting there. It's been fronted. He will never ever see death. Then what do we have down here?
Prepositional phrase.
Yep, we have a prepositional phrase. Excellent. And where's the end of that prepositional phrase?
The question mark.
Yeah, or at the period, yeah.
Oh, well, that's right.
Yep. At the end of the period. So into tone ona, which is like into the age. It's kind of a generic into the age is a literal way you translate it, but it's kind of a colloquialism for forever.
Okay.
So he will never ever see death forever. So John is trying to make a very clear statement here that not only is there no chance, but forever will he never see death.
Okay.
So all of those layers of emphasis need to be paid attention to. Like, and what I mean by that is like there are repeated layers of emphasis that are being laid out by the author here. That this really never ever is going to be possible all the way until the end of the age. The other thing that you would need to maybe comment on at some point in the future, moving on from Greek 2, is that this accusative has been fronted. Normally, you wouldn't expect the direct object to be here at the beginning.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And so they've pushed that direct object way to the front of the word order, which is unusual. Okay, let's do number 3. We'll maybe finish with this one. So I don't want to push you too hard tonight.
Okay. Well, let's start. You have the question mark at the end.
Yep, we have a question mark at the end.
Then you have the comma.
Yep, we got a comma right here.
And that's all those I see.
Yep, excellent observations.
I don't see any conjunctions anywhere. Unless
let's look.
Ta is not a conjunction, is it? No.
Ta is not a conjunction, but hina is.
Oh.
And it's one of those subordinating conjunctions. It's one of those tricky conjunctions that we've been talking about that often will trigger subjunctive clauses.
Okay. All right.
So we need to pay attention to that. Whenever you see hina, you're going to expect you're probably dealing with a subjunctive. If we just look over here quick, this jumps out to us.
Right.
And what is that?
It's air command. It's the aorist.
It is air command. Yep. It's the second aorist subjunctive.
Right.
Yep. We're just going to mark that there. We'll come back to this. Let's go back to the front. Do we have a primary verb in the first clause?
Do
we have a verb in the first clause?
Let's see. Yes. Poiesomen. Had to think about what what that meant for a minute.
No, yeah, absolutely. And where do we want to draw lines on it?
There where the sigma is, and then the omen, right? Yeah.
Yep. You have this omen ending, which is the first plural. Then you have that sigma, which is an aorist, which denotes that we're dealing with here with an aorist. And then this is what verb do you think this might come from?
Poieo.
Poieo. Excellent. Excellent work. So this is going to be something like we have just to review, we have a first person plural in the subjunctive. What flag should that set off? Do we remember anything about any particular independent subjunctive usages that use first person plural only?
I can't remember. No, I'm sorry.
No worries. So the hortatory subjunctive, which was that like let us, that inclusive command, which is what we're seeing here. And what you'll learn is that every time you see somen, you're probably just going to jump immediately to a hortatory subjunctive, because Paul uses this all over the place. And so you're going to get very used to this. So it's going to be something like, let us do evil, which kind of seems weird, right?
Yeah.
Let us do evil, but let's translate it and then figure out where we went wrong. So let us do evil, hina.
In order that.
In order that or so that, either one.
Good may come.
Yeah, it would be like so good. If this were a substantival, it might be something like so that good things may come. No, that's excellent. And what is wrong here? What do we not take into account?
What are we not taking into? The question mark.
Yeah, this is a question. So it's not a command to necessarily let us do evil, but rather,
should we
do evil? Yes. Or you might go with something like ought we do evil, or something like that.
Is that King James? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, yes, you're exactly right.
Like something like might we do evil? I don't know.
Yeah, like, and so this is actually part of a larger kind of critique. If you look in the original context, because this is part B. So this is actually like the direct statement of a larger rhetorical question. And so in the context, it is not, is it, as they blaspheme us and say that we say, and then the quote, let us do evil so that good things come. And so this is like, it's a little bit unfair because we actually haven't been given the whole quote. Like this is a quote within a larger like rhetorical question that Paul is asking.
I got you. Yeah, I understand.
So that's why it's awkward. It's a very awkward translation. But yes, strictly translated, it would be something like, should we do evil so that good things may come? Or shall we do evil? So that possibility of the subjunctive would show up there if this were alone, but it's not. It's part of a larger rhetorical, like he's quoting what the opponents are saying that they are saying. So like he's quoting them, hypothetically quoting the Christians.
I got you. I follow you.
Cool. So here we go. That is the subjunctive. That's the adverbs. That's all of that kind of bundled together in a single, kind of go around. kind of initial questions or thoughts, or
I think I'm gonna have a little. I think I'm just gonna have to work
process
through
time?
it. Yeah.
I
Especially
agree.
with the adverbs, that I was looking at those and I'm like, okay, because some of those remind me of the contract verbs. And I'm like, oh
yeah, and they're going to look like contracts. That's why that vocab was so important about us memorizing contracts with those vowels.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you go back to the original and you say the gloss, the lexical form of that verb, you'll know if it's a contract because you've memorized it in that length, in that extended form where that extra vowel is there in the lexical form. So this goes back to, like, do you know which verbs are contract verbs or not? Because morphologically, they're going to look identical to these subjunctives.
Right.
Exciting times. Okay. Well, we're going to wrap it up there. We'll be meeting on campus on Wednesday in the office down the hall if we have any questions.
All right.
So, alrighty.
Hey,
have a good evening.
Before I let you go, can I pray with you can I pray for you?
Yeah. Sure, please.
All right. Father, I thank you tonight because we know you hear and answer prayer, and we know that you're a good God. Lord, I thank you for Thomas and for what he shared with me. I thank you for his wisdom, Lord, for his knowledge and what you've granted him and allowed him to learn. And I just ask you tonight to touch his body. Lord, this infection, this thing that he's dealing with tonight, I know that you're able to heal him. And I pray that you would just touch him from his head to his feet tonight. And Lord, that you would help him to feel better. And Lord, help him to be about the business that you've called him to do. And take care of his family, Lord. Watch over those children, his wife, Father. Just bless that home in a very special way. And we give you glory for all things tonight in Jesus' name. Amen.
Excellent. Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. You have a good night, brother, and I'll see you Wednesday.
Sounds good. I'll see you Wednesday.
All right. Blessed to you.